Good evening to you and welcome to The Story. I'm Evan Watson. Thanks for joining us. Tonight, let's look at healthcare and, importantly, healthcare accessibility. To get the quality care you need, it shouldn't matter where you live. But we know it's not that simple. Patient outcomes can be tied to patient access. And for some, that concern is poignantly relevant right now. It's tonight's big story. Medical provider Adventist Health Tillamook recently announced it was closing 3 rural health clinics in Oregon. The decision leaves thousands of people without a doctor nearby. The company said it had no choice but to close the clinics due to long-standing staffing issues, a problem that's plagued rural health care nationwide. Thomas Schultz has this story.
Up near Mount Hood, along the Salmon River, is the small town of Welches. A town which for almost 40 years has been served by this clinic.
I know they were really busy.
Though now, that's changing. Last week, Adventist Health Tillamook announced they were closing the Welches office, shocking the town.
You would think it'd be to their advantage to keep it open.
And their landlord.
Well, this was a huge surprise.
In a press release, Adventist Health says they're closing the clinic due to long-standing staffing issues. Though some residents
No, I don't
buy it.
Well, there was a doctor here that was here for 38 years. So, and they had him replaced before he was gone.
In a follow-up statement, the company says they're dedicated to serving Welches and the Mount Hood community and say patients can go to the nearest clinic in Sandy, a little over 20 minutes away.
I know that the clinics in Sandy, they're already pretty busy and understaffed, as most businesses are. And so it's going to be difficult trying to find a new doctor.
Some are already looking past Sandy to Gresham for a new doctor, a choice they aren't happy about.
If you're deathly ill, you don't want to drive 45 minutes.
And Welches isn't the only clinic Adventist Health is shutting down due to staffing. Lincoln City and Sheridan are closing too.
This is kind of like a landmark.
Elizabeth Jack Porky lives on the same street as the Sheridan Clinic. She says its closure will worsen health care for many in her town.
All those residents who have gone there for years have to now travel an extra half hour.
And staffing issues are causing clinics to shut down nationwide. Last year, the Health Resources and Services Administration issued a report showing 65% of rural areas had shortages of primary care physicians.
I don't think there's quite an end in sight.
Dr. Eric Weiser, OHSU's Dean of Rural Medical Education, says for years, Oregon's rural health care has slowly deteriorated. That's partly due to a move in medicine to specialization and away from general care. And most specialists train and work in urban areas, leaving a shortage in rural places.
It's going to be stressful for those communities to find care.
A stress people in Welches are already facing as they search for a new doctor somewhere.
We're going to have to find a doctor that's actually taking patients. That'll be the first step.
Thomas Schultz, KGW News.
Well, now we move to your power bill. PGE has asked the Oregon Public Utility Commission for another rate increase, but this time around, the company is facing stronger than usual pushback right from the start. If this sounds familiar, that's because PGE just increased rates by 17% in January. The company is asking for regulators for another 7% hike starting in January of next year. If approved, it would be the 3rd straight year that PGE has increased rates by at least 7%. But the Oregon Citizens Utility Board, or CUB, an advocacy group for consumers, has now taken the unusual step of asking regulators to dismiss this latest request straight away. Citing the big rate increase in January and higher power bills from the recent cold snap, Oregon CUB says customers are clearly saying enough is enough, and this proposal to them is a bit tone deaf.
And it's loaded up with a bunch of other stuff, including some wish list items like a brand new mechanism that would ensure large rate increases every January for the next 8 years. And so we just looked at this and said, no, this is not a good starting place for a case. The commission should reject this and tell the company to go back to the drawing board with a bit more empathy for your customers.
I talked with Jenks, the executive director of CUB you saw right there today, and I asked him, what's the likelihood that the commission comes in and chooses to dismiss this rate increase request entirely?
To be honest, I don't know. We've never done this before. We've been around for 40 years. We've never asked at the front end of a rate case for it to be dismissed. So this is really new ground for Oregon. I really don't know what our chances are, but we really do think it's the right thing, and we really do think this is what PG customers want.
PGE previously said this rate hike would help cover operating costs, upgrade infrastructure, and install local batteries. We asked PGE for any response to the Oregon Cub, asking regulators to throw this request out right away. And we got a simple one-sentence statement back saying PGE is and will continue to be fully engaged in the public rate review process administered by the Oregon Public Utility Commission. Well, do you have any thoughts on this? You can share your comments directly with regulators on the Public Utility Commission's website. Just look for the comment on UE 435. That's PGE's request for a general rate revision. Now let's take a look at some of your comments from our big story last night. It was about a woman suing the Gladstone School District. She says they were censoring her. Glenda Shearer says she criticized the school board and district leadership both online and in person. So they told her that if she wants to speak up during public comment periods at school board meetings, she'd have to send them her comments written out in advance and have them approved by the district before she'd be allowed to speak. She was told that if she goes off script, she'd be muted. And at one point, she was told to edit part of her comments before she'd be allowed to talk. Shearer was later banned from attending school board meetings altogether, which are supposed to be open to the public.
The school board member is elected to be my representative in public education. And so in order for that person to do his or her job, they need to know what the public wants and what is important to the public. And yes, it is an uncomfortable conversation.
This demand that the public pre-submit their comments to a government board for review to make sure that the government board is pleased with the comments before they're spoken out loud. It's really outrageous.
The district chose not to comment on the lawsuit, but plenty of you wrote in. One viewer, who didn't leave a name, wrote, "The public should not be restricted from expressing their views. They should only be excluded from public meetings when they pose an actual physical threat to a school board member or another member of the public." And William says he was a school board member for 10 years. He wrote, "The meetings are the place where the public has the opportunity to address school district operations and business. Absent threats and actual combative behavior, the public has the right to testify. The public's taxes pay for public schools. Public schools need the public's input." Viewer Marlene agreed.
I totally disagree with Gladstone School District. They went way beyond what they have a right to do. Everybody has a right to go to a school board meeting unless you're violent and uncontrollable.
But some of you think that school board meetings have gotten out of hands at times and that the board should be allowed to say who gets to speak up. Here's a voicemail from Vicky.
I think it is absolutely okay for school boards to see what people are going to say before they testify. There's a lot of people that say a lot of inappropriate things, so people like that should be banned from school board meetings. They're not getting anything done. They're not saying anything productive.
Sounds like Vicky's dog agrees as well. You can check out the full version of this story right now on our KGW YouTube page or KGW.com. You'll also hear from a local First Amendment professor on how the legal case might hold up in court. And if you want to weigh in on this or on any of the stories that we cover, we do want to hear from you. Send us an email at thestory@kgw.com or leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. When we come back, a look into Christian health sharing ministries that claim to operate similar to health insurance and what happened when customers in Washington state had big medical expenses.
But he said, what we will do is a congregation will get together one day and we will pray for your health. And he said, that's what you're paying for.
Why they're exempted from the regulations that health insurance companies have to follow when the story returns. People in Washington looking to cut their health care costs are being warned to steer clear of religious-based plans. They look like insurance but don't operate by the same rules because of federal exemptions. Chris Ingalls talked with customers who found out the hard way.
It's quiet. It's grounding.
Outside Leavenworth in central Washington.
It's just home.
Bethany Stull has more appreciation for the simple things and more gratitude for life.
It was 2018 when I got diagnosed with my tumor. I felt really betrayed by my own body.
Bethany had another problem. She couldn't afford health insurance, and her treatment might require a lifetime of medication. At the time, she was only 26 years old.
When they told me I had a tumor, I was angry. I was really angry.
There was some relief when she searched online and found a healthcare plan called OneShare.
When you make a monthly payment, your contribution is pooled together with other OneShare members.
She signed up for just over $200 per month.
How did $200 compare to anything else that was out there?
Oh, God, it was amazing.
I believed everything was covered, and that was right around $40,000, and I still thought that I was covered.
Dee Dunphy from Sela thought he had insurance through the trucking company he worked for, but after a stroke landed him in the hospital and his medical bills were unpaid, he contacted his OneShare representative to find out why.
He said, if you read your policy further, you'll find out that we're not an insurance company, that we are a Christian service.
They're called healthcare sharing ministries. When the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, ushered in new regulations for insurance, Republicans and religious organizations pushed for a special category. These religious-based healthcare plans are exempt from insurance regulations. Not all healthcare sharing ministries are bad, but buyer beware.
Every single time I got back a big invoice or a big, list of things, and it said patient's responsibility, and it was 100% of the bill.
It's all on you, right?
100%.
She says not one of her medical bills was paid. Same for Dee Dunphy's big hospital bills.
But he said, what we will do is a congregation will get together one day and we will pray for your health. And he said, that's what you're paying for. I had no way to pay $40,000. And prayer wasn't going to get it for me.
Prayers instead of payments aren't enough for many of the 194 people who filed complaints against healthcare sharing ministries in Washington state in the last 3 years.
They want us to go after the healthcare sharing ministry for them to pay their claim. That's out of our purview.
Deputy Insurance Commissioner Michael Marchand says there's little his office can do because of the federal laws protecting healthcare sharing ministries.
That's like get out of jail free card. That gives them just carte blanche to not pay anything.
State regulators caution health plans like OneShare are not insurance. Insurance companies are required to keep a pile of money in reserve so they can pay claims, but not health sharing ministries. Insurance companies guarantee to pay legitimate claims, but not health sharing ministries. Essential benefits like mental health or substance abuse treatment, covering pre-existing conditions, and caps on out-of-pocket expenses. Those are not requirements, and many healthcare sharing ministries don't cover those things.
I would say they're manipulating you. Don't do it.
After nearly 50 complaints, the insurance commissioner fined OneShare $150,000, and it agreed to stop enrollments in Washington state. But that enforcement, used against 8 healthcare sharing ministries, is rare and only happens when they deceptively market their product as insurance. However, for clients like these, the insurance commissioner has no authority to force OneShare to pay their claims.
They don't have no regulations or anything. They can do whatever they want.
Texas-based OneShare declined an on-camera interview. A company lawyer said the risk of protracted and costly litigation forced the company to settle, even though Washington's claim that it's not a legitimate health sharing ministry is legally and factually incorrect.
I would caution against anyone signing up for a healthcare sharing ministry. It's much higher risk with a lot less reward at the end of the day.
Cub, come here.
And that's something you don't want to find out only after you are sick.
Good boy.
Still ahead on the story, another big win in the massive effort to revitalize Portland's Albina District. How an investment of nearly $500 million from the federal government will be used to change the landscape of North and Northeast Portland. The group working to revitalize the Albina District is now $500 million closer to its goal. The Federal Department of Transportation awarded a total of $488 million toward the project. Albina was once a thriving hub of Portland's black community in North and Northeast Portland. Now I-5 cuts through where many of those homes and businesses once stood. Families were forced to move in the 1960s and 70s for the highway and several other projects, and the Albina neighborhood was severed in half. But a group called the Albina Vision Trust is working to rebuild the area with homes, businesses, and community spaces. Here's what the executive director, Winter Johannes, at a press conference said today.
We are leading America's largest restorative redevelopment effort, one that centers the rerouting of black people, families, and culture in the core of Portland's city center. That work includes making sure that we are reflected in the built environment and that we participate in the wealth generated by our presence here as owners of homes and businesses.
The funding will go to the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project, which will build a cover over I-5, reconnecting the Albina neighborhood. Members of Oregon's congressional delegation who secured the funding met with members of the Albina Vision Trust to celebrate the investment. Senator Ron Wyden says it's a step toward fixing the bad decisions that were made decades ago.
And given the shameful history of decisions that were made in blocks from here decades ago, where you ripped up, and I use those words specifically, lower Albina neighborhoods, we lost generational wealth for this community. And so many black Portlanders simply looked at government and said they aren't going to give us a fair shake.
Members of Congress say they think the money will create construction jobs and attract more investment in Portland's downtown and city center.
You know, there hasn't been much new investment in downtown lately. I think this is going to be a catalyst. It's going to help us with the Lloyd Center, you know, extending the streetcar up to Montgomery Park. And these things all hang together. OMSI. I think it's going to really attract lots of investment that's going to multiply the impact.
This effort to revitalize the Albina neighborhood has earned quite a few big investments lately. In addition to the federal award, the Oregon legislature dedicated $25 million to the project during this year's session. Portland Public Schools also agreed to a resolution that works towards selling their headquarters in North Portland to the Albina Vision Trust. And Nike co-founder Phil Knight last year announced that he'd be donating $400 million to the Rebuild Albina project, a group with the same goal. The Portland Art Museum is expanding and local artists are stepping in to help out. John Goodwin met up with an artist and a printer working together to bring work to life and to give back to the place that inspired them.
Every project we do is completely different from anything we've done before.
At Maloney Printing in Northwest Portland, art comes to life.
And it's really very rewarding to work in traditional processes that really haven't changed in hundreds of years.
Paul Maloney runs this fine art printing studio with business partner Harry Schneider and studio manager Cassie Ferguson.
It's all done by hand, and we're running it through the press under extraordinary amount of pressure. And the paper is damp, so it pushes down into the incised or etched areas of the copper and pulls up the image.
It's kind of like one of those important part in history that has been ignored.
World-renowned artist Otis Kwaku was born in Ghana, but now calls Portland home. He's talking about his latest piece, the one rolling through the press.
The print that we're doing with Otis is a traditional etching on copper plate.
I've always been a big fan of the Western movie and a cowboy especially.
It's a self-portrait of Otis as a cowboy, part of his series highlighting the forgotten history of black cowboys and cowgirls. This self-portrait is anything but self-centered.
The museum inspired me a lot. First time when I moved to Portland, Oregon, it was the first place I went to see different kind of art. It was the first place that I discovered a lot of artists that I have never seen before that continue to inspire me today.
When I look at his work, I see power.
John Goodwin with the Portland Art Museum knows Otis well. One of his paintings is part of the show Black Artists of Oregon, running through March 31st.
It's the very first time that we've ever put together an exhibition like this.
Malawi Printing is producing 50 prints. 31 have already been sold. All the proceeds go directly to the museum.
Every single dime goes to the Portland Art Museum, and it's really powerful for a young local artist to be willing to give back to the museum that way.
The next 9 prints are on sale for $4,000 and the final 10 for $4,500.
This is my home now, and I feel part of this community. I feel part of this state. So it's my way of just giving back to where I live.
John Goodwin, KGW News.
John Goodwin talking with John Goodwin there, always finding special stories. Well, tonight on Straight Talk with Laurel Porter, 2 congresswomen from the Northwest, from both sides of the aisle, come together to talk about changes they want to see on America's southern border. Democrat Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez from Washington and Republican Lori Chavez-DeRemer from Oregon are co-sponsors of the Defending Borders, Defending Democracies Act. That act outlines plans to deal with immigration and foreign aid to places like Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan.
We've gotten to know each other over the last year. Certainly, we know that we have the same values in the Pacific Northwest. We recognize what's happening on the southern border and how that's affecting Oregon and Washington. When we drill down, we're talking about the fentanyl crisis and the overdose. While we're not a border state, we recognize the devastation it can have on the streets for our young people, in our school system, for families worried about that. So that's one major issue. We also recognize on a national security level what can happen when dictators take over, like Putin in Ukraine. What we don't want to see is China to be aggressive with Taiwan, and we want to make sure that Israel can defend itself against Iran.
Always fascinating to see 2 lawmakers from 2 different parties find that common ground, and no one better to draw out those questions and answers than Laurel Porter. You can hear details on their plan, plus why they're both pushing for a ban on the app TikTok. That's coming up next on Straight Talk here on KGW, or you can catch it anytime on our KGW YouTube channel. That is the end of our show here tonight. Thank you very much for watching. But remember, our story never ends. We'll see you on Monday.